So you might have seen some advertisements for David Attenborough's upcoming documentary on Netflix, Life on the Planet, something to that effect. Sorry, I can't remember the name exactly. And I saw some clips. He was being interviewed by the three young royals, which I found was really odd. But I guess and they were also having different celebrities interviewing David Attenborough. I'm not sure why celebrities and royals are chosen as people to interview him as part of this documentary, but I guess they want to draw people in. One of the people who was interviewing him was Billie Eilish, who's a singer. She's fairly young, I think, early 20s or late teens or something, and she's vegan. And probably might be one of the very few vegans who is actually interviewing David Attenborough about how important non-human animals are to us. Now, let's just look at the premise of that, which is something that I often have a big problem with, is this idea that this planet and the animals who live on this planet, that somehow it's all about us. It's not about the fact that this is their planet and that they have a right to live without our interference, without us basically overrunning, and that's his words, overrunning them with our technology, with our clearing of forests and destroying mountaintops, destroying land, destroying oceans. And I'm going to get to that in a minute, what we can do to address that. And I think if you follow this channel, you probably know already a major thing that we can do, which I'm sure didn't come up in this documentary, but who knows. I'll give you a hint, it's vegan. So anyway, so the thing that I have a problem with is this idea that this is our planet, we humans, this is our planet, not their planet too. And they're here for, in some ways, our amusement and to look, for us to look at them for entertainment, basically. When push comes to shove, we think that we are the most important species on the planet. Even if people sort of go on about how important other species are, and usually there's a compartmentalization of certain species who are like us are seen as more important, like mammals and the primates and all of that. Even David Attenborough, his favorite animal is a primate. And, it might be dolphins and whales and animals that we find very interesting. So the whole premise of this film, really, underneath it, the underlying premise, this unspoken thing even that a lot of us have, is that animals are not, this isn't their planet and we happen to be sharing the planet with them, as we are animals too, but that they are sharing the planet with us, or they are here for us, and we have to save them because we like to look at them. Now, how speciesist and human supremacist can we be? As a vegan, I find it I've got to be really honest and say I find it really offensive, that sort of premise. Even when I was not a vegan, I didn't really think that way, although I was using animals. So I was eating, wearing, and using animals. So I was very speciesist and thought those animals that we had domesticated to use as property and as resources, that they were here for me to use how I wished. And I didn't think about the killing and the torturing and the exploitation, or the fact that even if it had been done in a really sort of kind way, that would make it okay. I never really thought anything through, really, because I was accustomed to believing that animals were here for us to use, because it's just something, you're born into this situation and everybody tells you that, and you get fed animal products from when dairy, meat, eggs, fish, etc., from when you're a child, from when you're a baby. And you're taught that animals they're very sweet, and some animals we should protect, and other animals are here for us to kill and to eat and to use their secretions. Instead of giving it to their babies, we take it from them and then kill their babies because, it's sort of, we're not told that when we're children, but I mean, that's what's going on. And we're being fed this propaganda and this indoctrination, this speciesist indoctrination every day, every second of every day. And then if children sort of have this whim, I want to be vegetarian because they don't like to kill the animals that they're read about in nursery rhymes, people will oftentimes mock them or say, well, that's okay, darling. It's okay to do that, basically pushing them back into it even though often children have this natural predisposition not to want to, and that's a sensible thing, not to want to eat animals that we're told that they're our friends and that they're sentient. This documentary, I'm guessing that he's probably without it being an anti-capitalist message. David Attenborough, without it being a overt anti-capitalist message, because heaven forbid we should criticize capitalism, particularly in England where they've actually made it now almost illegal to introduce anything that has an anti-capitalist message into the education system. This is something that's just happened just recently. So even David Attenborough, who is not vegan, by the way, and who has this sort of strange kind of reductionist message, which is ridiculous, reducing meat intake and stuff. It's sad, really. Even he, though, will not, I don't think he would probably have an overt anti-capitalist message, but I'm sure it's in there. And I'm sure that without him, in the West, we actually use a lot more resources, so we may not be having as many children maybe as we used to, but it doesn't matter because our consumption is so great in the West and we are so damaging. But, there are people who seem to think that human beings, and I'm looking at humans here now, I'm not looking at different races, and I'm not buying into that Malthusian thing. I'm not buying into this racist thing, but I'm looking at us as a species. We think that we can just keep on breeding and breeding and breeding and breeding and just multiplying endlessly, and that's okay. Even socialism doesn't really talk about that. Even socialist, it's like it's okay to just for our species to just keep breeding ad infinitum. And people make the mistake of thinking that we'll always have plenty of resources and stuff. But that's not the point. The point is that, our species is in overshoot and collapse, just like any species that breeds itself, it's out of control, and then it uses up all the resources, and it's just destroying everything. Eventually starts to die off. It's called overshoot and collapse, and that's where we are in some ways, except that we're taking the whole planet with us. We're taking all these other species with us. And we're not going to find a planet B in time, fortunately, because we just take that dysfunction with us. We're not going to find it for the reasons that we pretty much have runaway global warming, and it looks like we're going to go extinct in this century, probably 2060, something like that. And it's not these sea level rises are the least of our problems. The least of our problems. So just say we weren't going to go extinct in this century. We really would have to get a hold of this idea that we're the crown of creation and we can just breed ad infinitum because we have medicines and technology that allow us to do that. And just ignoring the rest of the planet as if they're just here for our entertainment, basically. And we're going to have to, we can be dragged kicking and screaming in relation to whether or not to go vegan. But ultimately, this planet is making its decision for us, because animal agriculture is one of the greatest contributors to the climate crisis. And read Dr. Joseph Paul's report, and I often post the meme about that. 119 countries, 40,000 farms from farm to fork, 90% of all we eat, and it's the largest study to date. And what they discovered was that a vegan diet, a diet free of milk, eggs, dairy, fish, etc., is one of the greatest, single most important things we can do to address not only the climate crisis, but eutrophication, acidification of the oceans, water shortages, land shortages, protecting the Amazon rainforest, because 2 acres a minute of Amazon rainforest are cleared every minute for animal agriculture. So if we're not vegan, we're contributing to the destruction of the Amazon rainforest, the lungs of the planet. So it's a wetlands is also on fire. The reason being because animal agriculture is destroying that. It's something very, very important to the planet. It's very unique. We can be dragged kicking and screaming into becoming vegan, or we can go willingly and address this dreadful devastation of animal agriculture. But these animals' lives, they're sentient animals, just like the dogs and cats whom we live with. And we can see that, can't we? We can see that. If we see somebody hurting, say, a pig or a cow, and they're being abusive, we want to intervene. Most of us would want to intervene. But this is happening every single day en masse to billions and billions and billions of animals that we have domesticated and bred into existence to be used as resources. This is happening every single day, every single moment of every single day, all over the world. So we have this thing where we would intervene if somebody's hurting an animal like that, and yet we're paying other people to do it for us. It doesn't make any sense. And I get very despairing. I've been doing vegan education for 15 years. I've been vegan for 15 years now. Well, actually, I've been doing vegan education for 14 years, probably about 15 years. And it's very despairing for me to still see young people, particularly people on the leftists who are for peace on this planet, who want the end to the military-industrial complex and imperialism, and yet cannot see the connections between what we're doing to non-human animals all over the planet and the ones that we're breeding into existence by the billions. 1 to 3 trillion land and aquatic animals are tortured and killed every single year for completely trivial reasons and mostly palate pleasure, and we don't need these animal products at all to survive. You know, when I see young people sort of who are not, they see that it's wrong to be colonizing and settling and killing, you know, people in these different countries that have not submitted to U.S. empire, yet they cannot seem to connect the dots that these same ideas of otherizing and then colonizing and imperializing and killing based on a discrimination which is irrelevant, the irrelevant criterion. Otherizing is caused so much violence, and that's exactly what we're doing to non-human animals. Exactly. So until we get a grip on that and connect the dots and stop doing this that is totally unnecessary, that we can take personal responsibility for right now, we don't have to wait for permission from anybody. It's not any system that is to blame. It's not capitalism. It's not socialism. It's not communism. It's prior to all religion. We've been speciesist and killing and hunting and maiming and drowning and trapping and breeding into existence animals for a long time, long before religions. We've been speciesist and dominating this human supremacist thing that has caused the carnage and suffering, untold suffering of countless trillions at this point of non-human animals whose only crime is because they were born another species. We have to stop this, and it is at the center of these other violence, these other forms of violence, all the other discriminations. If we can oppress if we can oppress the most invisible group on the planet, which is the largest group, the most vulnerable group on the planet, then we can do that to any other human on the planet, any other group, minority groups, black people, brown people, any other group that is vulnerable. We can do that too. It's at the center of all this violence. David Attenborough, I think he's a lovely man, I do, but he is not vegan, and it doesn't matter to me if he only eats a little bit of meat. Imagine if 10 billion people are all eating a little bit of meat. That's a lot of animals, and those animals love life just like we do and do not want to die. And if we don't need to do it, which we don't, then there's no excuse for that, really. We don't need animal products at all to survive. We don't need meat, dairy, eggs, fish. And fishing and all of that is destroying the oceans. Look up Instagram, Seaspiracy. I don't know what happened to their documentary. They were supposed to do a documentary called Seaspiracy, and I'm not sure what has happened to that. But look on the Instagram account and see all the devastation we're doing to not only the animals that are target fish, but all these other animals that we fetishize, like dolphins, whales, etc., turtles and all of that. Have a look at the devastation that fishing in the oceans does. David Attenborough is a lovely man. I'm not sure if this it's probably not going to say to people we need to go vegan. It's probably not going to mention that largest study to date that I mentioned, which is so important and yet is just really mostly ignored. It's probably not going to say we need to end capitalism, because capitalism is inextricably linked with imperialism. It has its own destruction inbuilt, but it is going to eat up the planet until there's nothing left, and we can see it right before our eyes. In fact, it's going to bring out imminent extinction and all the most other species on the planet. Is it going to say we need to end capitalism? I don't think so. Because who's producing the movie? Probably a big studio, big corporations. So we're not going to get any answers really from David Attenborough. We're going to get these appeals to maybe cut back on meat, which is just makes me annoyed to hear people suggesting that. because it's BS on so many levels. He might even suggest we need to have little mom and pop farms. Well, that's a nonsense, because if you've got a lot of non-vegans on the planet, there needs to be an economically efficient way to produce animal products. So mom and pop farms are going to use ridiculous amounts of land, and they're not going to be able to feed the planet. And in the end, according to a program Chris Hedges done on Contact, this guy said that animal agriculture is not going to be able to feed the planet by 2050 anyway.
By 2050, the world's population is expected to reach nearly 9.8 billion. Most of this increase will occur in the global south. To feed a population of this size, we will have to produce more food in the next 40 years than was consumed in the last 10,000 years. If we continue to rely on the animal agriculture industry to feed us, the planetary food supply will soon suffer severe shortages, leading to massive hunger, malnutrition, starvation, and widespread unrest. Industrial animal agriculture already occupies more than half of the world's arable land and resources. It consumes most of our water. It expels more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire transportation sector. It is polluting and often poisoning the water, soil, and air, and deforesting the planet, as well as causing species extinction. The clash between overpopulation and a species reliant on the animal agriculture industry is a recipe for global catastrophe.
So we're going to have to abandon that. I'd like to see people abandon it, because it's just wrong. It's morally wrong to keep exploiting and torturing and killing and artificially inseminating and murdering young because they're no use to the dairy industry, the male calves, and all of that. I'd like to see all of that end anyway. Whether we have enough, whether it could feed the planet or not by 2050 is irrelevant to me, really. I'd like to see people think about this and think, no, this is not, we don't need to do this, so we should stop it. And I would like to see, most importantly, that we see in the faces of non-human animals, whether they're like us or not, that's irrelevant. I'd like to see us recognize their sentience and think they love life just like I do, and they don't want to die, and I'm going to respect that, just like I would want somebody to respect that I love life and do not want to die, and we go vegan. That's what I would like to see. We can do that. It's not too difficult. It's not difficult at all. It's easy. I didn't know anything about veganism when I became vegan. Really, barely anything. I just knew that what I was doing, suddenly I found out about the dairy industry and I was horrified. And I went vegan overnight. And I just found out from there. But now there's so much more information. It's so much easier to be vegan, and you don't need to be buying all these fancy products. I don't, really. Very rarely do I ever buy any pre-made vegan products. Very rarely. There's just so much that we can, eating, wearing, and using animals is just totally unnecessary, and I don't need to get into the whys and the how to do it. There's plenty of information. I have my own vegan resource too, in podcast form, howtogovegan.org, so please check it out. There are other things probably about this documentary that I'm not going to see, because it makes me too sad. I can't bear to see animal documentaries anymore. I find the whole thing very distressing, what we are doing to non-human animals. The most obvious things, too, of just eating, wearing, and using them. So I can't watch it, but I would say it won't have an anti-capitalist message, but it'll be hinting at it. It won't say we need to go vegan. It might say cut back, and that's just BS, because it doesn't say these different things. And it probably won't say maybe we need to really rethink what we're doing about our idea that we can endlessly populate this planet. It probably won't. It might hint at it, but there won't be any real hard suggestions. And people, because we're so speciesist, we will find ways to excuse things or trim around the edges. And all I can say to that is, here comes extinction.